She said it loud enough for the whole table to hear. A handmade quilt? Mom, we live in Connecticut, not a log cabin. My daughter-in-law, Serena, set the folded quilt down on the gift table like it was something she'd found in a parking lot. She didn't even unfold it. She just looked at it, tilted her head, and laughed. That bright, social laugh she saved for moments when she wanted her friends to laugh along with her. They did. My son Elliot stood 3 feet away holding a glass of champagne. He looked at the quilt, then at me, then at the floor. He said nothing. I had sewn that quilt by hand over 14 months. Every square was cut from fabric that meant something. The flannel shirt his father wore on their first camping trip, the yellow cotton from the dress I wore to Elliot's kindergarten graduation, a strip from the receiving blanket we'd brought him home from the hospital in. I had stitched a small E into the corner in navy blue thread, the same color as his Little League jersey. Serena's mother, standing beside her, murmured something about rustic charm, and then turned to ask a caterer for more sparkling water. I picked up the quilt. I folded it back the way it had been. I set it in my tote bag. Then I walked to the coat room, got my jacket, and drove home. I did not cry until I turned onto Route 9. And then I cried for most of the 40-minute drive. I want to be clear about something before I go any further. I was not crying because I felt embarrassed. I was crying because of what I understood in that moment. The thing I had been refusing to understand for 3 years. My son had chosen who he was going to be, and I was not part of that picture. Let me back up. My name is Lorraine. I am 63 years old. I live in the same house in Millbury, Massachusetts that I have lived in for 31 years. A colonial on a quarter-acre lot with a front porch that needs repainting and a backyard where I grow tomatoes every summer. The house is paid off, has been for 11 years. I worked for 32 years as a claims examiner at a regional insurance company. It was not glamorous work. I sat at a desk and reviewed documents and made determinations and wrote reports. I was good at it. I was precise and I was patient, and I had a head for numbers that my own mother always said was wasted on a girl, which tells you something about my mother and also something about the era I grew up in. I raised Elliot alone. His father, my husband Raymond. No, wait. I cannot use that name. His father left when Elliot was 9. I will call him what Elliot called him later in life, absent. Elliot's father was absent. I raised my son alone on one salary in a 3-bedroom house, and I did it without asking anyone for help. And I did it by being very, very careful with money. I did not buy new when used would do. I did not lease. I did not carry a credit card balance, ever, not once in my adult life. I packed my lunch every day for 32 years. I bought my cars used and drove them until they had over 200,000 miles. I took one vacation every 3 years, usually somewhere within driving distance. What I did do was invest. Every month, without fail, I put money into index funds. I started in 1991, when Elliot was 7, after I read a library book about personal finance that changed the way I understood money entirely. I did not pick stocks. I did not chase returns. I simply bought broad market funds and left them alone and added to them every single month for 3 decades. I also owned a 2-family house in Worcester that I purchased in 2003 for $187,000. I rented both units. The mortgage was paid off in 2019. It now generates about $30,100 a month in rental income. I am not telling you this to brag. I am telling you this because it is relevant. Because of what came later. By the time of that anniversary party, Elliot and Serena's 10th, my net worth was a little over $2.1 million. Not extraordinary by some standards, very comfortable by mine. Enough that I had not worried about money in a long time, and enough that I had been quietly, carefully thinking about what I wanted to do with it after I was gone. Elliot knew I owned the rental property. He did not know its value or that the mortgage was paid off. He did not know about the investment accounts. He knew his mother worked a desk job for an insurance company and drove a 2016 Honda Civic and shopped at Market Basket and made her own curtains. That was all he knew. That was all I had shown him. Serena came from money. Not family money, exactly. Her parents had built it themselves through a regional restaurant group that had expanded significantly in the late 90s. Her father, at the time of the anniversary party, owned 14 locations across New England and was in the middle of negotiating a deal to expand into New York. Her mother had the posture of someone who had never once stood in a checkout line, wondering whether to put something back. They were not unkind people, exactly. They were people for whom a certain level of material comfort was so baseline that anything below it simply did not register as real. When Serena's mother said rustic charm, she was not being cruel. She genuinely could not conceive of why anyone would give a handmade quilt as a 10th anniversary gift. But Serena was not her mother. Serena was sharp. Serena had a marketing degree and a renovation blog and a way of making you feel, in any given conversation, that you were slightly behind. When she laughed at the quilt, she knew exactly what she was doing. She had done versions of it before. The gentle redirect when I brought homemade jam to Easter, the barely there pause before thanking me for the hand-knitted socks at Christmas, the quick subject change whenever I mentioned anything about my house or my job or my past. She had been slowly, systematically communicating to my son that his mother was quaint, and my son had been listening. The drive home that night, I kept thinking about the look on Elliot's face. Not shame, or not only shame, something more complicated than that. He had looked at the quilt and then at me, and I had seen him calculate something, some internal accounting of cost and benefit, and he had decided that the cost of defending me was higher than he was willing to pay. That was the moment I needed to understand. The Monday after the party, I called my financial advisor, a woman named Claudette. No, I cannot use that name either. I called my financial advisor. I told her I wanted to make some changes. I told her I wanted to review my estate documents. I told her I had some thinking to do. She was not surprised. She had been my advisor for 9 years. She had seen people in my situation before. Take your time, she said. But yes, let's look at everything. I also called my attorney. Same message. Let's look at everything. And then I sat down at my kitchen table with a legal pad and I wrote down everything I had been planning to do for my son. There was the investment account I had been thinking of transferring to him gradually, starting at my 65th birthday. There was the rental property, which I had intended to put into a trust with him as beneficiary. There was the $75,000 I had earmarked to help him and Serena with the renovation they kept mentioning, the kitchen overhaul, the primary suite addition. There was the college fund I had been quietly building for their daughter, my granddaughter Bea, who was 7 years old and liked dinosaurs and had her father's laugh and had, in the past year, started calling me Grammy Lorraine in the particular way children do when they're uncertain whether warmth is allowed. I looked at that list for a long time. I did not cross anything off that night. I just looked at it. 3 weeks after the party, Elliot called. This was notable because Elliot typically did not call. We communicated mainly through texts, the kind of texts that are really just scheduling, confirming Thanksgiving, confirming Christmas, confirming that yes, I was still coming to Bea's school play in April. He called on a Sunday evening and I let it ring twice before I picked up. Hey, Mom. Hey. There was a pause. Elliot had his father's habit of expecting other people to fill silences. I did not fill it. So, he said finally, Serena and I were talking, and we wanted to reach out about the kitchen project. The contractor gave us a quote and it came in a little higher than expected. I waited. We were wondering if you might be in a position to help, even a little. We know you're not. I mean, we don't want to put you in a hard spot. I looked out my kitchen window at the backyard. The tomato plants were coming in. I had staked them that morning. How much? I asked. The full project is around 90,000. We were thinking if you could do 30, we could handle the rest. $30,000. He was asking me, a woman he believed worked a desk job and drove a used Honda and shopped at Market Basket, for $30,000. He believed I would have to struggle for that. He was asking anyway. Or he didn't believe I would struggle. Maybe he had started to suspect. Maybe Serena had said something like, she must have some savings. Older people always do. Either way, he was asking. I need some time to think about it, I said. Of course. Yeah, no pressure. I'll let you know. We said goodbye. I sat at the kitchen table for a while. The tomatoes were very green against the evening light. I did not say no. Not right away. What I did was this. I called my attorney and I had her draw up a formal loan agreement. Not a gift, a loan. $30,000 at the current applicable federal rate, which at that time was just over 5%, with a repayment schedule beginning 6 months from disbursement, monthly payments, a 10-year term, fully documented, signed by both parties. I also, quietly, had my estate documents revised. I did not disinherit Elliot. I want to be clear about that. I am not a person who believes in punishment as a parenting philosophy, and I was not acting out of revenge. What I did was remove the assumptions. The automatic transfers, the trust arrangements, the earmarked funds, all of it restructured. Not eliminated. Restructured. With conditions. With timelines. With provisions that required Elliot's active involvement, not passive expectation. If he wanted the rental property, he needed to manage it, learn it, understand it, take on the responsibilities. If he wanted the investment account, he needed to sit with me and my advisor and understand what was in it and why. If he wanted the college fund to go to Bea, he needed to be present in that process. Earn it, not perform for it. Earn it. There's a difference. My attorney looked at me over the rim of her glasses when we finished the session. You know, she said, most people wait until something catastrophic happens to do this kind of planning. I know, I said. This is better. I know that too. I emailed Elliot the loan documents 3 days later. I wrote a short note. I told him I was glad to help. I told him I wanted this to be handled properly. I told him the terms were standard and fair and that I had had my attorney review everything. He did not respond for 4 days. When he finally texted back, it said, "Mom, we weren't expecting this to be a loan." I read it twice. Then I wrote back, "I know." He called that evening. "It feels weird," he said. "You're my mother. We're not strangers." "No," I said, "we're not." Which is exactly why I want this done correctly. I want us to be okay 10 years from now. I want Bea to see that money in families gets handled with respect. There was a long pause. "This isn't really about the kitchen, is it?" I watched the backyard through the window. A cardinal had landed on the tomato cage, bright red against all that green. "No," I said. "It's not." Another silence. "Mom." He stopped. He tried again. "That night, at the party, I didn't." "I know," I said for the 3rd time. "I'm sorry." I believed him. I think he was sorry. I believed him. I think he was sorry. I also think sorry is a starting place, not a destination. "Sign the papers," I said. "Come for dinner Sunday. Bring Bay." He came for dinner. He came alone. "Serena had a thing," he said, and I did not push. Bea sat at my kitchen table and ate 3 bowls of clam chowder and told me in complete, breathless sentences about a pachycephalosaurus she'd seen at the Natural History Museum. I listened to every word. After Bea fell asleep on the couch, Elliot and I sat at the table with decaf coffee and I told him, not everything. Not all at once, but enough. I told him about the rental property and what it was worth. I told him about the index funds. I told him about the advisor and the restructured estate plan. I showed him the legal pad with the original list, the one I had made the night after the party, and I told him what had been on it and what I had changed and why. He was very quiet for a long time. "I didn't know," he said. "I know you didn't. Why didn't you ever?" "Because," I said, "I wanted you to love me for what I was, not for what I had. I wanted you to call me on Sundays because you wanted to talk to your mother, not because you were managing an inheritance." He looked down at his coffee cup. "And I wanted," I continued more slowly, "to know that the people around you valued you for you, not for what you might someday have access to." He looked up at that. I could see him working through it. "Serena doesn't know," he said. "No. When she finds out, that's between the two of you," I said. "I hope it goes well. I hope she surprises you." I wasn't sure she would, but I hoped. The kitchen renovation happened. The loan papers were signed and the money transferred, and 6 months later the first payment came through. Right on schedule, $243 deposited into my account with a memo line that just said Payment 1/2020. I screenshot it. I don't know why. I just wanted to have it. Elliot started calling on Sundays. Not every Sunday, but most. We talked about Bea's school and his job. He worked in logistics management, had for 12 years, and sometimes we talked about the rental property, because I had started bringing him into those conversations, walking him through the decisions, showing him what it looked like to think long-term about real estate. He was a good student. Better than I expected. He had his mother's head for numbers. He had just never been given the chance to use it. Serena was another matter. She found out about the money, not through me, but through Elliot, who made the decision to tell her after about 4 months. I do not know exactly how that conversation went. What I know is that in the weeks afterward, her behavior toward me changed. She was careful, measured. She began calling me Lorraine instead of Elliot's mom. She began asking questions about the investment accounts, about the property, about what I was thinking in terms of estate planning, which is a sentence no daughter-in-law should ever say to her mother-in-law directly. I answered politely. I said everything was in order. I said I had a good attorney and a good advisor and that they were handling things well. She never apologized for the quilt. I did not expect her to. By that point, I understood that Serena operated in a world where the quilt had never happened. She had simply updated her model of me, and in the new model, the incident didn't exist. That's fine. People are who they are. I want to tell you about a Tuesday in October, about 14 months after that anniversary party. I was driving Bea home from school. I picked her up on Tuesdays. It was our arrangement. An hour and a half that I treasured more than most things in my life. And she was in the back seat telling me about a fight she'd had with her best friend over something I didn't fully understand, involving a bracelet and a misunderstanding at recess. She was very serious about it. She used words like technically and actually in the way 7-year-olds do when they want to be taken seriously. I listened. I asked questions. I did not offer solutions. At a red light, she leaned forward against her seatbelt and said, "Grammy Lorraine, did you ever have a friend who made you feel bad but you still wanted to be their friend?" I thought about that for a moment. "Yes," I said. "More than once." "What did you do?" "I paid attention," I said, "to how I felt after I was around them. Not during, after. The during part can be confusing, but after, that's usually when you know the truth." She sat back. She thought about it. "Okay," she said. We drove the rest of the way in comfortable silence. That was the moment I understood that I had, in fact, made the right choices. Not because of the money. Not because of the estate plan or the loan documents or any of it, but because I was still here, still present, still someone she came to with the hard questions. That was the thing I had been protecting all along. The quilt is in my guest room now. I unfolded it and put it on the bed in there. the room where Bea sleeps when she visits, which she does every few weeks. I did not make a point of it. I did not say anything. I simply put it there. The first time Bea saw it, she ran her hand over it and asked me what the different fabrics were. I told her about the flannel shirt. I told her about the yellow dress. I told her about the receiving blanket, which had been hers before it was a quilt square. I had taken it from her nursery 3 years ago when she'd grown too old for it, and I had not told anyone. She was very quiet when I told her that last part. Then she said, "So part of me is in there?" "Yes," I said. She thought about this. "Can I sleep under it?" "That's what it's for," I said. She pulled it up to her chin and looked very pleased. "That is what I want you to take from this, if you take anything at all. Not the money, not the strategy, not the lesson about people who only see your worth when they can measure it in dollar signs. Those things matter, but they are not the point. The point is this: I did not become less. I stayed. I tended my garden, and I made my investments, and I drove my sensible car, and I sewed my quilt, and I waited for my son to find his way back. And he did. Slowly, imperfectly, the way people actually change. Not in a single moment, but in 100 small choices over a long stretch of time. The loan gets paid every month. He never misses a payment. I don't need the money. I will probably give it back to him someday, or put it into Bea's college fund. I haven't decided yet, but I am letting him pay it. Because the paying matters. The showing up month after month matters. The learning to be responsible for what you ask for, that matters more than any number in any account. I know that now. I knew it then too, I think. I just needed one very painful night to remind me why I'd always believed it. I still think about that cardinal on the tomato cage. The way it landed there while Elliot was on the phone asking me for $30,000. So red against all that green, so completely unbothered. I don't know why that image stayed with me. Maybe because it was the one thing in that moment that was exactly what it appeared to be. That's the thing about living quietly for a long time. People stop seeing you. They look at the used car and the market basket bags and the house that needs repainting, and they construct a version of you that fits what they can see. And then they act on that version. They make decisions based on it. They laugh at your quilt in front of a room full of people because in their constructed version of you, the quilt is the most you could have offered. What Serena did that night was unkind. But I understood, even then, that it wasn't cruelty for its own sake. It was something more ordinary than that. It was a failure of character that had been allowed to grow unchecked. Nobody had ever required her to look closer. Nobody had ever held a moment still long enough to ask her, "What does this actually cost someone else?" Elliot's failure was different and harder to sit with. He knew me. He had been raised to look closer. Somewhere along the way, the habit had gotten lost, not stolen, lost, and that distinction mattered to me when I was deciding what to do next. I did not make those decisions out of anger, even though I had every right to be angry. I made them out of something closer to clarity. 30 years of careful choices, not just financial ones, but the daily choices about what kind of person to be, what to stand for, how to show up, even when it costs something, had taught me that cause and effect are patient. They don't rush. They don't announce themselves. They simply accumulate the way interest accumulates until one day the balance is undeniable. Elliot needed to learn that, not as a punishment, as a gift, the same kind of gift the quilt had been, the kind that takes a long time to understand. There's a kind of wisdom that can't be handed over. It has to be worked for. You have to sit with the advisor and read the documents and make the monthly payment and slowly, over time, understand what it means to be responsible for something. That's not a financial lesson. That's a character lesson. It's about becoming someone who can be trusted with money, yes, but more than that, with other people's well-being, with the quiet, invisible labor that holds a family together. And there's a kind of strength that only comes from staying, from not walking out permanently, even when you have every reason to, From deciding that the person who hurt you is still worth the long, slow work of holding to account, not by punishing them, but by refusing to let them stay the version of themselves that caused the harm. I drove Bea home from school every Tuesday for a reason. I answered her questions about friendships and dinosaurs and whether part of her was really sewn into that quilt. Yes, it is, for a reason. I was keeping something alive that could too easily have been extinguished that night at the anniversary party. A thread of trust. A habit of turning toward each other. The loan gets paid every month. Elliot calls on Sundays. B sleeps under the quilt. I didn't win anything. I just didn't quit. And after 63 years, I've come to believe that not quitting, doing it with your eyes open, with your standards intact, with your self-respect still in your own hands, is the whole thing. That's the whole thing. That's the whole thing.